Welcome to Clemson University, South Carolina's premier public institution. 2016 National Football Champions, over 23,000 students who bleed orange and purple. A top research university and one of the fastest growing in the Southeast. However, with all the buzz around Clemson University, many fail to recognize and remember the university's unique history. Being founded in post-Civil War South Carolina means that Clemson's beginning is shrouded in scandal and discrimination, something the university today does not like to emphasize. While it is understandable that a history of this nature is not something to necessarily be proud of, it is crucial to the continuation of the Clemson community that the history of our university is not glazed over or forgotten. In order for the history to be fully recognized, the student body and broader community needs to see Clemson for all that it once was. While current Clemson students usually have a more or less decent understanding of the university's founding, it is crucial that the student body has a much more in-depth awareness of our history.
Clemson University was founded in 1889 by Thomas G. Clemson on the plantation of his father-in-law, John C. Calhoun. The school was initially founded as an all-male military institution by the name of Clemson Agricultural College. It later transitioned to a co-ed civilian institution in 1955. However, the history of the university's founding and the significance of the time period goes much further than that. The history of Clemson University can be found all over campus, from plaques to the names of historical figures memorialized on some of Clemson's most iconic buildings. Though many of these signs do not necessarily make false claims, in many cases they fail to tell the complete history. An example of this can be seen through the way the university memorializes the historic figures who contributed to Clemson's founding. Tillman Hall is one of the oldest and most recognizable buildings on Clemson's campus. It is named after Benjamin Tillman, who served as governor of California from 1890 to 1894 and U.S. Senate from 1895 to 1918. Tillman met with Thomas Green Clemson about using his land to create a college, and he led the political fight to have the state accept their plan. Tillman is seemingly glorified by the university for making the school possible, but they don't ever mention his other actions while in public office. As governor, Tillman tried to systematically remove African Americans from politics. He was in favor of the Edgefield Plan, which made it very difficult for African Americans in South Carolina to vote because they were faced with intimidation, fraud, and violence at the ballot box. Tillman also abolished elected local governments and instead appointed officials himself. This meant that even in areas where African Americans were the overwhelming majority, blacks couldn't serve in the public office. Aside from his oppressive policies, Tillman chronically put forth the idea that white violence is justified and should be expected whenever white supremacy was challenged, and he also defended lynchings. The Strom Thurmond Institute, which today houses Clemson's Visitor Center, is one of the first buildings a prospective student will enter when they come to tour campus. While Thurmond was not involved in Clemson's founding, his large contributions to the university led to a building being named after him. The building's namesake, Strom Thurmond, was the founder of the Dixiecrat political movement, which had a platform based on segregationist ideas. Clemson celebrates Thurmond for his impressive political career and his contribution to the university, but once again doesn't say anything about Thurmond's strong beliefs of segregation and opposition to the Civil Rights Bill. Clemson's Honors College is named after the famous politician John C. Calhoun, whose house still stands on the campus overlooking Memorial Stadium. Calhoun had a major impact on the early years of our country's history and served in the House of Representatives and the Senate, as well as Secretary of War, Secretary of State, and Vice President. He owned between 70 and 80 slaves on his land at Fort Hill, which became Clemson's campus. Calhoun believed in slavery and the benefits it granted. He was born and raised in a society where slavery was taken as a given and the morality of it was rarely questioned. In fact, Calhoun even defended slavery and claimed that in some cases, slaves were better off than white workers during the Industrial Revolution.
Through recent events, we can see how the mistelling of Clemson's history continues to affect the student body. See the Stripes, a poem published by A.D. Carson just 4 years ago, shows that even today, students still feel that their day-to-day life on campus is affected by the university's history. He calls out the university for manipulating their history's narrative to share only what makes us look our best. Carson recognizes that covering up our university's history will impact our public image in due time. The See the Stripes movement on Clemson's campus became very active in 2016, after bananas were found hanging from a sign commemorating the African Americans who lived and labored at Fort Hill. Members of Clemson's student body were greatly offended by this gesture, and on-campus protests began as a result. When 5 students were arrested for protesting, over 100 students came the following day to continue the protest. These students were protesting not only the banana incident, but also the impact of Fort Hill's presence on campus, and the many buildings on campus named after racist historical figures. In response, President Clements sent an email to the community where he condemned the defacing of this sign, calling the banana incident hurtful and disrespectful. Shortly after, President Clements released a 3-page-long memo where he reiterated the importance of diversity, acceptance, and inclusion on Clemson's campus. However, many felt that this memo was not enough of a response to what had been occurring. The president claimed that he was listening to what the students wanted, but no true results came from the protests. The insensitivity of the students who put the banana on the Fort Hill sign could have stemmed from a misunderstanding of the weight of the history at Fort Hill. If these students had a more complete understanding of Clemson's history, we believe that events like these would be much less likely to occur. By not telling our whole history, students may not think it very important, which can lead to skewed views of our school, our campus, and our classroom.
Clemson has already taken steps towards telling our history more genuinely. The Clemson University website does tell a more or less accurate story of the university's history. Unlike the signs around campus, the website does explicitly state that the men like Clemson, Calhoun, Tillman did own slaves and plantations. The website also mentions facts like Tillman was a member of the KKK. This shows that Clemson is taking steps towards becoming a more historically aware campus. However, these historically accurate web pages will not be seen unless someone specifically searches for it. It is important to the community and student body that the university continues to work towards a more widespread understanding of our history. After discussion, we were able to determine some ways the university could do just that.
Our first idea to accurately inform students of Clemson's historical background is by adding it into the CU 1000 course, taken by all incoming freshmen and transfer students. In the CU 1000 course, we go through different modules where we learn about our community and how to treat each other. We even learn about our nation's government and founding, but not once did it mention anything about Clemson's history. Most students don't know about the history coming in, because it is not something that is shared with us during orientation and visits. By adding an additional module to CU 1000, the university will be able to mandate that all students learn about the university's history.
One idea being tossed around to raise the standards of historical education is the concept of a history class focused around the university's past. This idea sees merit in how there will be a measurable grade of students' understanding of the history, and they will get credits counting towards their graduation in the process. However, while it does sound nice, it does present some flaws. Firstly, a flaw appears based on the decision between making the class optional or required. If it's optional, then only people who are more interested in learning Clemson's history than taking a different course will be in that class. But having the class as a requirement will cause large numbers of students to take the class every year.
Another concept in development is the creation of a museum that depicts Clemson's history in its exhibits. Such an idea would allow for students to drop in and learn whenever they felt such an inclination, allowing for easier, less demanding access to knowledge about Clemson's history. A museum would also allow for student jobs that could simultaneously make students experts on Clemson's history and create job opportunities for students.
Earlier on, we talked about the historical markers that are located around the campus. While these are fantastic for providing a short, easy-to-access history about particular buildings and locations in Clemson, providing information in any form longer than a paragraph is basically impossible without making the letters so small they'd be illegible. However, there is a way to get more information in these places: QR codes. By providing a QR code on these plaques that links to a web page with more detailed information, people whose interests are piqued by what they read on the plaques can continue learning about whatever it is that interested them while it still has their attention.
By implementing these programs, the university will begin taking the necessary steps towards a more thorough public understanding of the history of Clemson. It is understandable why the university would not want to publicize the history of its founding, as it is not necessarily something to be proud of. However, by not recognizing and accurately telling the history of our school, we are disregarding and erasing the university's history. In order for the strength of the Clemson family to grow, the history of the university needs to be accurately told, genuinely accepted, and learned from.